two warriors fought amidst the carnage and corpses on the battlefield. The red-robed man's swift movements brought his opponent down. He got curious and questioned the man why he was so bent on killing even though the demonic forces have been dealt with. Behind him were his associates, who were named Spear King and Fist King. The people expressed their gratitude to the Supreme One and thanked him for his contributions in defeating the demonic forces. However, he turned around and dismissed their words as worthless. The Spear King was displeased with how the conqueror used his words. The conqueror got riled up and blamed the two of them for stabbing him in the back for suppressing those who fell into the demonic path. After a pause, the Spear King and the Fist King charged their chi and told the conqueror that it's merely for the sake of peace in Europe. The conqueror derided them as cowards for banding together against him. The Spear King then launched himself from the ground and unleashed the wrath of his weapon, the Heavenly Thunder Spear. The Spear King charged at the conqueror, thrusting his spear forward. Through the dust, he saw a silhouette of his target and felt confident that he could kill him. But the conqueror easily caught his strike. Fist King, his partner, caught up to them and unleashed a flurry of attacks upon their enemy, but the conqueror dodged them with ease. Fist King then used a powerful punch in an attempt to smash the conqueror into the ground. Fortunately, he was able to avoid the attack. Once more, both Spear King and Fist King unleashed their full might upon the conqueror, but their efforts were in vain as he easily dodged all of their attacks. He then taunted the two, urging them to exert themselves and show him the true power of the 10 great martial masters. They then ascended to the surface and wreaked havoc upon the battlefield. The two opponents were visibly exhausted, but the conqueror seemed to have boundless energy. They felt hopeless, wondering how their enemy could possibly have so much strength. To make matters worse, the conqueror had not even revealed his powerful short sword. They saw this as an opportunity to attack him when he was vulnerable and kill him. The conqueror noticed a small cut on his finger and accused the two of daring to damage his perfect body. After that, he finally gets serious and unsheathes his short sword. And in a split second, he cuts through their bones, which instantly kills them. They were feeble beings, yet they claimed to be the 10 great martial masters. 10 years hence, he was seen meditating at a waterfall. He recounted a story from his past, in which he had only taken up the sword to prolong his life. He had only eaten food that he found on the ground, and he had swung his sword wildly like a beast. On his journey, he encountered many martial masters, whom he defeated in battle. He grew stronger through these fights and became an unstoppable force. He reigned supreme as the Almighty. However, he fell into a deep void. After escaping the futility and madness that was drowning him, he has finally found the answer: ascension. There was nothing left for him to achieve in the human realm, as he had reached the peak of martial arts. After 10 years of arduous toil, Ha Hu Young was finally ready to become a saint. He soared high above the sky, piercing the clouds. But just as he was about to reach the heavens, a group of gods appeared on the clouds and barred his way. The gods forbade him from sainthood because his aura emanated a dark essence, a vengeful soul. He was barred from entry, but they still offered him a chance to atone for his past misdeeds. Hu Young then rebelled against them and was determined to succeed in his quest to become a saint. Upon hearing this, the gods blew him off the clouds, blocking his path. He flew back to the high clouds, but his path was still blocked. Then the other god used his power and summoned a meteor to crush him. Then the huge rock covered his body, but he was able to blast his way through it. Then a child saint came to the front and spat a huge chunk of water upon Hu Young, which almost drowned him. The goddess then blew a gust of wind, which propelled Hu Young far from the clouds. Hu Young resented the gods and vowed to return for them one day. Hu Young was cast down to the depths of the sea by the gods. As his consciousness began to fade, a woman appeared before him. He soon woke up to the crying woman and slapped her off his way. He then gets up and looks at his reflection. He was analyzing his body until he later finds out that he's now inside the body of a child. As the woman helped Hu Young to his feet, he asked her who she was. She looked at him with confusion and reminded him that her name was GM Chung Sang, who we will refer to as GM Chung. the overseer of the Namgung family's eldest son, and his caretaker. Hu Young then asked if this place is the house owned by the Namgung family. She got upset and asked him if he really remembered anything. He was still oblivious at the moment. Then he asked her who he was. She became irritated and informed him that he was the second son of the Namgung family, Lord Namgung Hyuk, who we will refer to as Namgung. He was stunned after hearing that he was born into such a royal family, and then he fell to his knees, thinking that he might be dreaming. He then asked Jiam Chung what year of the martial calendar it is. She said that it's been 70 years since the establishment of the Orthodox Heavenly Alliance. She later runs off and tells him to rest while she calls for a doctor. Namgung recalled that he was already 80 years old when the event occurred. He was 90 when he attempted to ascend the heavenly mountain. Therefore, 60 years have passed since he fell from ascension. This implies that he is now over 150 years old. He was filled with rage as he resented the gods for banishing him. All that he had built up in his previous life had now been cast aside. He quickly gathered himself and hoped that he could still use his memories and experience to his advantage. He gets more confident now that he could grow much faster with the help of his experience, and use it to climb his way back to the top. But first, he must go to a secretive place where he can determine the potential of his newfound vessel. Later that night, he sneaks out of the house. He was lucky that no guards were near his house. But then, he saw a couple of men walking along the path just at the other corner. He thinks about killing them, but he quickly gets a hold himself, remembering that he had just been reborn. Namgung improvised a plan and decided to jump over the wall. He used his light body technique and ran towards the wall as fast as he could. However, he quickly became exhausted and wondered why his technique was not working. He realized that his body was not used to it, so he tried again with renewed determination. He charges up his powerful chi. He stops for a second after hearing that something just broke. He looks down below and sees that his leg is completely dislocated. Jiam Chung and the doctor quickly responded to the incident and took him back inside. His leg was bandaged, and they were fortunate that the damage was not severe. The doctor instructed him to take his medication as directed. Jiam Chung advised Namgung to refrain from doing anything reckless in the future. He then informed them that he was not a potter and would not do such a thing. After a brief pause, he realized that they were speaking about him. His doctor informed him that his body was frail and that he had brought him some decoction to drink with his medicine. Jiam Chung admonished Namgung not to further damage his body, lest she feel guilty for his reckless actions. He then ordered both of them to leave the room. The two persisted and remained by his side. He proceeded to yell at them and immediately broke his shoulder. The two eventually left him in his room. Namgung was disappointed that the body he possessed did not even have the basics down. He searched for answers and focused all his energy inside his body. He saw that the paths to which his energy flowed had been blocked in 9 different places. He considered the possibility that it was a 9-yang flow blockage, but he dismissed this as the body was cold and the cold air too strong for this to be the case. However, it was indeed the 9-yin flow blockage that he had encountered. The 9-yin flow blockage is an incurable disease that blocks the flow of energy due to an excessive amount of yin energy. The disease is so bad that no one with the disease passes the age of 20 due to the violent yin energy. Upon realizing the issue, Namgung broke off laughing. He then gritted his teeth and unleashed all his anger on the gods for placing the soul of one who was meant to ascend to the heavens into the fragile body of a young boy. Incensed, he denounced the gods as thugs and vowed that one day he would exact his revenge upon them. He then punched the wall with all his pent-up rage, breaking his hand in the process. The doctor returned to Namgung's room and bandaged his injured hand. The doctor had warned him not to engage in any strenuous activities, as his body was as fragile as an egg. Namgung requested that they not disturb him any further. After that, they left him again in his room. He got upset knowing that he used to stand at the top and dominated in his previous life, but now he's reborn as a weakling. He continued to raise his pride because he knows that he's still the supreme one who could always face the inevitable. In order to overcome this trial, he has 2 methods at his disposal. The first is the dark mind purification technique, which removes impure energy from the body and replaces it with clear and firm energy. The second technique is the internal mind and body technique, which infuses all the muscles and bones in the body with energy. If the two techniques are successful, the 9-yin flow blockage will no longer hinder his progress and his martial arts prowess will far exceed his past achievements. Namgung began to meditate. Outside the house, Jiam Chung was about to enter his room with a medicine she had brought for him. She noticed that it had gone quiet and immediately burst into the room, suspecting that he might have harmed himself again. Upon seeing Namgung spurting blood from the top of his head, she rushed to block the wound. However, another wound opened up. As she stopped the bleeding from the first wound, his entire body burst open, spraying blood like a fountain. As soon as Namgung wakes up, he finds himself wrapped around in patches. Jiam Chung got really worried that he almost died. He realizes that his body became disabled just after a little bit of cultivation. He started crying. Jiam Chung asked him why he was crying, and he assured her that they were not tears, but manly sweat. She then fed him a gold medicine. He asked what it was, and she said it was a pill called the Heavenly Golden Pellet. Namgung suspects that it was the pill that's said to increase his internal energy by 10 years. She was unsure and only knew that it's an expensive medicine. And suddenly, Namgung got up with full energy just after taking the pill. He then broke down again and fell to his bed, overcome with despair. He had tried everything, all of his techniques combined with the medicine, but it had all been for nothing. He was hopeless. Namgung vowed to fix his body, even if it was the last thing he ever did. As Jiam Chung was about to leave his room, Namgung called her back and asked her where they stored the martial arts books. She inquired as to why he was interested in it. He calmly instructed her to show him where it was. Later, he removed all of his patches as he prepared to leave his room and go to the book storage, as his last resort was to learn a new martial arts technique. As he opens the door, a cold breeze blows his face off, then he immediately goes back to his bed. He thought that he was going to die as he realized that not even the body could take the cold wind. Namgung attempted to walk while wearing his blanket, but it was too heavy and he soon fell to the ground. He became enraged and tore the blanket off. Later, outside the house, Namgung recycled the cloth and used it as armor to protect himself from the chilly winds. Upon seeing the storage room, Huyang was impressed by its vastness. Having fished with the Namgung ruler in his youth, Huyang inquired of him whether his family's martial storage was truly as intriguing as it seemed. The speaker stated that the martial storage of the Namgung family was without equal, even when compared to those of other families. Huyang, however, could not understand what was so impressive about a place that simply stored paper. The Namgung ruler informed Huyang that the heavenly martial storage contained 1,000 years of the family's history. Huyang laughed, thinking that the man would lose his mind every time he talked about his family clan. Huyang admonished the Namgung ruler to keep quiet, as his noise was scaring the fish away. The ruler persisted, attempting to tell a story about his family's long and storied history. However, Huyang cut him off, threatening him if he did not stop. Upon reviewing his memories, Namgung reflected that he was not perfect, but he would be a valuable asset to the Orthodox sect. Later, at the entrance to the martial storage building, a pair of guards saw Namgung and blocked his path with their weapons. Namgung perceived the guards' actions as treasonous, so he dashed behind them and knocked them unconscious with a single blow. He emerged from the shadows confident in the knowledge that his enemies would not live to tell the tale after raising a blade against him. The guards quickly rose and apologized to him, explaining that they had not been able to see him clearly in the dark. He remembered that he was the second son of the Namgung family, and left them in peace. As he ascended the stairs, one of the guards instructed his companion to report the incident to the head of the household. Upon entering the building, Namgung was awestruck by what he saw. The martial storage room was a sight to behold, with countless bookshelves stacked high to the ceiling. Namgung began his treasure hunt, searching for the secret technique. Several hours later, Namgung is now resting on top of the book pile after looking into each and every book, but is unable to find the secret technique. and to think that the Namgung family was considered to be the best of the 5 great families. He suspects that the Sword King had lied to him about the technique. In a fit of rage, he screamed and planned to burn down the entire book storage. His heart throbbed intensely, and he hoped to find a solution to his problem before he met his demise. Having emerged from the book storage, his head still reeling, he was struck on the ears and knocked to the ground by a man. In the sunlight, a bearded man could be seen. Namgung inquired as to the man's identity. The man then used his powerful voice to knock the boy back again. He chastised Namgung for entering the martial storage, which was forbidden. The guards then advised the family head against using force against the boy, as his body was still healing. After hearing their conversation, Namgung realizes that he's the son of this man. His father then ordered the guards to leave them because he's busy teaching his son a lesson. He then proceeded to hug his child and asked him why he entered the martial storage. Hu Young turns his head away like a snake and thinks of manipulating this man for being a complete sucker for his children. The young man turned to his father, his weak frame belying his strength of will. He looked his father in the eye and asked for a drug to increase his internal energy, and a secret technique that would suit him. His father informed him that the seeds had dried up in the lands after the mass slaughter caused by the demons, but he promised to provide him with some. As for the secret technique, his father denied it, saying that if his cultivation was disrupted, it could lead to his death. Namgung still persists, and says that he'll die anyway if he doesn't try anything. His father insists that he'll give anything other than letting him learn martial arts. Hu Young finds him a stubborn man and thinks about strangling him instead. Namgung realized that his original plan had failed, so he changed his strategy. As soon as his father reached out to help him, Namgung began coughing heavily and appeared to be dizzy. He then began to say that he was going to die. His father was not pleased with what he was saying. Then Namgung begged his father once more to spare him some techniques as his dying wish, and promised to never learn martial arts ever again. Two soon broke their conversation and headed their separate ways. Later that day, Namgung proceeded to the library, where he could search for something useful. The library was smaller than the martial arts storage, but this time it would be much easier to find the solution he was looking for. This place was the King's Pavilion, the secret storage of the family that is only accessible by the family head and his blood. He was given entry to the storage, but he was warned of being overcome by greed and seeking the knowledge to learn martial arts. Namgung disregarded the advice and continued to read through the texts. Later that night, he was seen resting on top of the books he had read, the last one in his hands. He had found a few techniques from the kings, but none of those martial arts had been proven to benefit his body. He needed the internal energy cultivation technique to serve as the foundation for his growth. His stomach then started to growl, so he decided to eat first. As he was about to leave, he tripped over a pile of books and fell to the floor. He noticed the corner of the floor tile had lifted, and he used the last of his strength to peel it up. His arms were almost too weak to continue, so he switched to a long stick to pry the tile loose. Beneath the seal, Namgung perceived a glimmer of hope and believed that this would be his chance to finally redeem himself as the protagonist. Back at his house, Jiam Chung watched Namgung devour everything on the table. He then asked her if it was her first time watching someone eat. She then informs him that this is her first time seeing him eating well since all he ever does is eat a small chunk of food, then asks her to clear the table. He then informs her that this boy was just a spoiled brat and that he used to struggle for food back in his days. Namgung's words left her confused, and she left wondering what he meant. He dismissed her confusion and told her to clear the table for him. After eating the pill, he returned to cultivating his technique. While Namgung was busy cultivating, Jiam Chung was on her way to do the dishes. But suddenly she spots the First Lord, who was presumably Namgung's older brother. She calls out to him, but he immediately walks away after he's done with his business. Jiam Chung notices that the First Lord brought some tonics for Namgung. Jiam Chung expressed her opinion that the First Lord was an awkward sibling, as he could have simply checked on Namgung if he was concerned about him. On Namgung's side, as he cultivated, streams of light emanated from his body, distorting the air around him. He was cultivating a technique called Dark King's Mixed Heavenly Energy. It was the greatest martial art technique which made him the strongest in his past life. He is currently hesitating whether to learn the technique since it's not currently suitable for Namgung. He strategizes a plan to build a foundation around the internal energy technique that he found in the king's pavilion, and then fuse it with the heavenly dark energy. Namgung was worried if he could do it, but he pushes onwards and sticks to the plan since he's the supreme one. He materializes his body and consciousness in his mind to focus on the technique. He walks up right to his blood vessels and raises his sword. Then he sticks his sword right through and filters out the impure energy to inject the pure energy. After the process, an aura of light emerges from his body while he focuses on the technique. After a considerable amount of time, cracks begin to form slowly inside his consciousness until it gets completely shattered. Outside the room, Jiam Chung can be seen delivering food for Namgung. She suddenly notices a bunch of heat waves coming out of Namgung's room. And as a result, an explosion happens, destroying the walls of the room and causing Jiam Chung to fall. Jiam Chung notices that Namgung was still intact after the incident. She immediately rushes to him worried about his state, while Namgung barely manages to break through at one flow blockage. He suddenly faints, and the rest is history. Jiam Chung reported this to Namgung's father, who was worried. Jiam Chung apologized for the incident, and Namgung's father went to check on him. The First Lord advised his father to wait for his condition to improve before making any decisions. Jiam Chung concurred, as the head physician had advised them that it would be best to wait until Namgung's condition had stabilized. The father was vexed, but he had no choice but to obey. He thought that Namgung must have learned some techniques from the books and made a mistake. He held himself accountable for the incident, and believed that he should have discouraged Namgung to prevent any further incidents. Namgung was in his room, doing push-ups while he recovered. Don't forget to hit the gym. He had only managed to break through one of the 9 flow blockages, and this had almost put him in a dangerous situation. However, it was pointless, as his body was not a suitable vessel for the technique. Having developed a new technique, he decided to name it the Heavenly Dark King Technique. So cool! However, he was soon spotted doing push-ups by everyone, who were surprised to see him. Namgung asked them whether or not they had ever seen a person exercise before, but his question was cut off by the father, who began to question the head doctor if it was possible for him to do any kind of physical exercise. The head doctor explains that it was a miracle, but Namgung knew he was spouting bullshit and began to do more push-ups. Everyone was in awe watching him do push-ups. But he stopped since his body started acting up again. His father thought that he was currently dreaming, but the doctor tells him otherwise. The head doctor checked on Namgung's pulse and was amazed. His vessels were wider and sturdier than before, and his pulse became vigorous, like he was back to a healthy young man. Namgung explained that he was already healthy in the first place. His father hugged him out of pride. He couldn't be any more happier to see his son become healthy after everything that happened to him. Namgung's shoulders immediately got dislocated the moment he was embraced by his father. The father was shocked and asked the doctor to tell the truth. The head doctor explained that Namgung became more healthy than before due to his blockage improval, but he's still fragile as a pottery. Namgung rants to his father on what he should do about his dislocated shoulders. His father cunningly evaded the question and used an excuse about an emergency meeting with the elders. Jiam Chung informed him that there would be no meetings today. The father explained that's why it was an emergency meeting in the first place. He will be heading out to do some urgent business, and wished his son a speedy recovery. Upon his father's departure, Namgung, mad about his dislocated shoulders, vowed vengeance towards his father. But his father suddenly shows up and stares at him. He tells Namgung, "Hang in there," with a joyful expression on his face. Namgung was mad and told his father to put his shoulders back in the original place while others quietly moved out of the scene. And 1 month later, Namgung can be seen doing laps around the pavilion. The servants were amazed while they observed him. Jiam Chung couldn't believe it either that he was a different person after waking up from his collapse a month ago. Another servant almost discovers the truth about the manhwa, explaining that maybe Namgung's soul was switched with someone else. Jiam Chung tells him to stop saying dumb shit. But suddenly, they noticed that Namgung was nowhere to be found. Jiam Chung immediately knew something was wrong and came to check something out. Namgung was currently drowning in the pond, or was he? After Jiam Chung hurriedly inquired some questions on her master's whereabouts, the servant explains that the pond isn't even deep and no one could possibly drown. She thought that she was being paranoid and edgy after all the incidents Namgung had gotten himself into. In Hefei, a child presumably with her mother was enjoying some tangulu. The moment the child was about to eat it, it suddenly disappeared from her hand. The child was crying to her mother while Namgung enjoyed the tangulu for himself. He gathers around the place to look for some good alcohol. But suddenly, he catches a glimpse of 3 kids bullying another kid. The bullied kid suddenly runs to Namgung and asks for his help. Namgung harshly explained to the kid that he won't help him since he's getting beaten up for being weak. The kid was stunned. He says that it would be better for him to overcome it by himself without getting help from others, since the weak fall prey to the strong. He continues to walk along looking for alcohol, while the bullied kid gets beaten up again. Namgung was suddenly stopped by a mysterious hooded man inquiring what he's looking for. He notices that Namgung was looking for something around a while ago, hence the question. Namgung tells him that he wants to find the best drinking place in Hefei. The hooded man instructed Namgung to follow him. Having entered the alley, they arrived at their destination. Namgung went inside further and thought that the place was a hidden gem, but he was wrong. Namgung was framed, and a group of hooligans were waiting for an easy target. He was irritated that the place was not a drinking establishment. The hooded man told him that it would be in his best interest to surrender. While the hooligans analyze his clothes and think that Namgung came from a wealthy background, implying that the hooligans hit the jackpot, the big framed hooligan advised him that he should abandon his belongings and head back home. Namgung refuses and retorts back by telling him that he's the one who takes, not the one who gets taken. The dumbass laugh at his statements. They're actually fucked. The leader taunted him by saying that a child who grew up in wealth would not be aware of the harshness of reality. The leader instructed his men to beat him up and give him a taste of the real world. They comply and immediately threaten Namgung to hurt him. He questioned Namgung if he thinks that they're a pushover since they're being kind to him. Namgung responded in a nonchalant manner by saying that he did not think so. The thug slaps his food across his hands since he thought that Namgung was being arrogant. The ruffian clenches his fist and explains what the weak fall prey to the strong means. Namgung suddenly smashes his head against the wall. "I don't need you teaching me what I already know," said Namgung. The hooligans' jaws dropped. They were surprised by his strength. But unfortunately for Namgung, his wrist got dislocated after putting a little bit of strength in smashing the hooligan. He was ashamed of himself, turning into a weak state after dislocating his wrist while beating up some street thugs. But he fixes his wrist anyway, so no worries. The hooligans were enraged and immediately charged towards Namgung. A hooligan tries to stab him, but he grabs his arm and punches him in the face. The enemy was sent flying while the hooded man immediately tried to stab him in the back. But Namgung turns around and notices it quickly, so he grabs his wrist before it could stab him. He elbows the hooded man, causing him to writhe in pain. Namgung was lucky this time since his body parts were not dislocated. He mocked the hooligans since they were acting so high and mighty at the start. The hooligans got swayed with their emotions and they proceeded to charge at Namgung at the same time. Namgung smirked at them, thinking that they should have attacked him in that manner. Namgung hits the enemy in front of him with a karate punch while the rest gets comboed. Tekken 8 coming in early 2024, the leader was devastated as he watched Namgung destroy their crew one by one. The last one of the group fell down to the ground and only the leader was remaining. The leader was scared for his life, asking what Namgung's deal was. Namgung explained that he was just a martial artist since he can't use his internal energy yet. He thinks that he still has a long way to go since he only recovered for about 10% during the battle. One of the hooligans tries to get up, but Namgung immediately steps on his face, causing the ground to get crushed. He was annoyed because he had used everything he had to beat them up, but his opponent was already getting up, making him look weak. The leader was scared, calling him a bloodthirsty demon. Namgung suddenly challenges him to a fight since he's the leader, meaning that he's the strongest. The leader immediately rushes towards him to prepare for his strongest attack. He pulls off a Dajiza and apologizes for messing with him. Namgung was amused with his quick change of attitude. The leader explains that he's pretty insightful about these kinds of situations since it's needed to survive within the alleys. Namgung was disappointed in the thugs of today, finding them to be lacking in the courage and determination of those he had known in his past life. The leader tells him that he isn't like them since he has a considerable amount of guts. Namgung tells him that he found his words unconvincing while the leader pulls out a knife for a surprise attack. The leader prepares himself and immediately tries to slash Namgung, but he dodges it by leaping backwards. He rebounds himself back to prepare for a strong punch while the leader prepares to take it. At the First Lord's side, we see him currently inspecting a sword, presumably going to a battle. Jiam Chung attended to him, explaining that the Second Lord was currently heading towards the main street of Hefei. The First Lord sheathes his sword to prepare for any situation in finding his sibling. At Namgung's side, he can be seen carelessly drinking alcohol served by the leader himself with the hooligans in front of him. He asks the leader for another cup, but it was already the last cup left. Namgung gets irritated since it was already empty when he was just getting started. The leader tells him that it was his 9th bottle already. Namgung could care less about it and still wants more. The leader explained that all of them emptied their wallets just to buy the finest alcohol and side dishes they could find to satisfy Namgung. The leader took the bottle from Namgung and advised him to stop drinking, as he appeared to be quite intoxicated. He suddenly got blown away by Namgung's kicks since he doesn't like getting instructed. He vents his anger towards the hooligans and threatens to mess with them. The hooligans got frightened by his threat. Namgung threatened those who dared to harm him again by saying some gruesome things. Namgung felt sober after venting out his anger, so he decided to take a break and fell asleep. The hooligans observed Namgung warily, wondering what to do. The leader cautioned them against acting rashly, suggesting that this might be a test of their loyalty. The leader gets near Namgung and confirms that he seems to be asleep. But suddenly he was caught in 4K. The guards of the Namgung family spots him inside their hideout. The hooligans saw the guards and Namgung's brother, nicknamed Sword Dragon, stepped in. The crew was taken aback, as they had no idea whom they were messing with and believed that they were doomed. Namgung spews out something in his past life about the gods killing him and getting revenge. The leader immediately covers his mouth and immediately thinks of an excuse that he can explain. The Sword Dragon commanded him to remove his filthy hand from his mouth. The leader complied out of fear. Namgung ruins the plan and asks the leader for one more cup of alcohol. He gets kicked in the face by the Sword Dragon after hearing that statement. The Sword Dragon admonished him, stating that this was the second time he had warned him. Namgung was carried by the guards with Jiam Chung worried about his drunken state. He asked for the man's identity in front of him. Jiam Chung anxiously explained that it was his older brother and tried to get him to shut up. Namgung didn't realize that he had an older brother after all this time, while Jiam Chung shouts at him to just shut up and sleep if he's that drunk. Upon their departure, the Sword Dragon remained in the hideout while his rage was waiting to unleash, preparing to deliver judgment on those who touched his younger brother. A bunch of shrieks can be heard as they get outside. Namgung wondered what those screams could be, and Jiam Chung explains to him that his older brother is currently punishing the evildoers. She explains that his older brother is usually calm, but he loses his shit when Namgung gets involved in some incident. He retorts by saying that he's the one who beat them up repeatedly. Another day has passed, and a long-haired man can be seen quickly unsheathing his sword to slash a bunch of wooden dummies in a swift manner. He slashes all of them, and his father was impressed with his skills. The long-haired man has a nickname called Sword Tiger, and has reached 10 stars for the solitary spirit sword. I don't even know what that means, but I guess he got a high rank or something. The father tells him that he will eventually outshine the Sword Dragon from the Namgung family with his incredible potential. Sword Tiger gestured politely, and took his father's saying with honor. The father tells him to go back and rest for today. He observes and analyzes that his son, the Sword Tiger, may be able to catch up to the Sword Dragon of the Namgung family. He breaks the wood for an unknown reason just to show it was a dramatic scene. This is all for part 1 of the manhwa. If you've enjoyed, like, comment, and subscribe. Have a good day, y'all, and peace.